afternoon to all of you. And I hope the session that we had just preceding this panel discussion woke some of you up because it was really inspiring to hear about the Govardhan village. And I'm really pleased to welcome you to the topic today, which is leveraging mandatory impact assessments for better social program delivery. Now, at the outset, I know the topic seems very dry, but I promise you that we'll make it very exciting. And especially since you're coming right after lunch, we'll do our best to make it as controversial and provocative as possible. But let me just start by saying that if you heard the presentation before we began, which is on the Govardhan Village project, just from as someone who has been working in the field of impact evaluations for a long time, what was really standing out in the story was that it was really weaving in aspects of the impact that they have been having or they have been making in that area through their work, right? The impact on the tribal population, impact on different types of outcomes. And if you notice, they also use different formats. So they had quantitative numbers to show how the change is happening, but they also had a nice video or a story at the end. And you can ask yourself which was more powerful, right? But we need both. So what I want to begin by saying that before I focus on the topic of impact assessment, I want to really say that what is ultimately the aim of any CSR initiative? It is to bring about change. It is to bring about transformation. The transformation could be in the lives of people, it could be in the environment, it could be in the lives of children. And the question then becomes, are we making a difference? Is the change happening? Are we looking at the right type of change? Are we measuring it correctly? Are we measuring it at the right time? What if you're measuring too early? Because sometimes things take time, right? So overall, impact assessments are an extremely powerful tool that can be transformational and that can be really important not only from the perspective of the difference we are making, but also for those who are implementing. And yet here we are, where we have this amendment that happened in 2021, which makes impact assessments mandatory as a part of CSR. And the reason for this was that rather than looking only at the expenditure or the inputs that you're giving, we have to start to shift our lens to also see what change are we making on the ground. But the question remains, when you make something mandatory, does it really work? If people have not internalized the use and the need for something, then it can become something that's a checkbox, that becomes a report that's very nicely sitting in your bookshelf, but are you really using it? So in today's panel, I'm really pleased to welcome my panelists. We have a very eclectic panel, and we are going to get perspectives both from the side, from the demand side, those who are using impact assessments, those who are leading CSR initiatives for their organizations, and also from the supply side of those who are implementing these impact assessments. And together, my hope is that we can come up with some lessons that we can then take with us, get energized to maybe start building a community of practice around this topic and learning from each other. So without further ado, I would like to start off the panel discussion and invite my panelists to, by just starting and sharing their perspectives on what they think about impact assessment. Do they think it's important and necessary? And if they could also give some examples from their own lived experiences. So let me start with Milind.
Okay, I mean, thanks for, setting the perspective right. I mean, it was great that we had the clip of Govardhan and whatever they presented, because it syncs, as she rightly said, and what was presented. Everybody here are trying to contribute whatever. I mean, it could be the donor, could be, the implementing partner, NGO partner. We would always want to find out and answer that whatever we have done, have we done it right? So impact, making it mandatory is one way of looking at it. But is it essential? I feel that yes, it is very much essential, because only then, whatever efforts we are putting, the kind of money we are spending, and the expertise we are putting in, it will not have any accountability, okay? And anything which is not accounted for, I don't think people take it seriously, right? And so whatever you see the figures, what Govardhan shared, right? Those itself tell you that this is something, a serious, effort which are put, and how it has helped in building the, the entire ecosystem. I can share some examples. So we were doing CSR for quite some time, but at some point in time, from the donor's perspective or even from the NGO perspective, somebody is going to ask you, "Ki, what difference have you made in the entire ecosystem? So how are you going to, do that?" And that is something which impact will help. So it will bring in accountability. So just to share a small example, we've been working in a lot of domains. So once our management said that we wanted to be in environment and water tables are going down. So, can we do something about it? So we were very mindful on, adding 2, 3 facets to it. So farmer, they need water. Then our corporate, wherever, our offices are there, they are, using water. So how can we harvest and do it? So we tried looking out for what is there new in the market. So we drive the social impact and we try and see how we can enhance the impact. We did a small pilot, okay, of, reaching out 55 such entities, farmers and, corporates, etc. And the results were amazing. We were able to sustainably harvest 16.80 crore liters of water. And this is sustainable, very much economical, scalable. So that impact gave a sense of, achievement for us. Yes, this could be done. And now we are sharing this with others that, yes, if you want to work in this domain, this is the way it could be done. But if that was not there, that impact was not there, could have been difficult. So, I mean, I can, share many such examples, but then I'll, request.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Milind. That was very interesting. And I think you also raised a very good point about accountability and how, while in CSR there are investments that happen, are we also being accountable for the efforts we are making? So now I would like to turn to Smita for her to share her views.
Thank you, Shagun. In my introduction, you have heard that I represent the both sides of the table. More than 15 years in NGO and social sector and then moved to corporate. So when we say we, I'll represent both the areas. The topic, I'll come to that because there are numerous examples and the technicality of impact assessment takes a year to understand. The learning is that when the topic says the mandatory impact assessment, one part, and the second is the delivering better social programs. Now these two are very, very subjective and dicey areas for any CSR professional and NGO as well. Mandatory because now 2021 amendment is saying mandatory. But in a social sector, impact was always there as a by default part of a program planning, implementation and assessment. So is it a new or a mandatory thing for NGO sector or a social program? No. It is a new for corporate because corporates before this amendment never invested in monitoring evaluation cost or impact assessment cost or research cost. It was all part of 5% admin cost. So yes, making it mandatory makes a huge accountability and responsibility on corporate side to see the importance of impact assessment. I look at from that perspective. From social sector perspective, it is a very, very important part at the time of planning, right? Because I think that responsibility is on NGOs to train or educate corporates to understand that it has to be imbibed during planning, not to be done in retrospective. So on my daily basis, when proposal, I'll not take an example, but when proposal comes to me, there's not even output. Forget about outcome and impact. And impact, honestly saying, I'm very straightforward here, over-exhausted word without understanding the role of impact and how it is matching with the goal, not the objective. So yes, that's the one thing that mandatory requirement makes it important. Yeah, it will start with tick box, as you say, but the way transition has happened in CSR from making it mandatory to corporates have picked up very fast to make it impact-based program. So we also look forward that from mandatory it will go to impact-based. Delivering social programs, we will maybe discuss in a second round. The one thing I would always take away from this discussion is that when we plan the program, both, supply side is both side, even the NGOs as well as corporate, and demand side is basically at community level. Make impact in your baseline, and baseline as a mandatory role in proposal. We'll take another delivery part in the next segment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Smita. I think this was really interesting, and you've touched upon some very critical themes. Starting with this theme about it's not something new for non-profits. For a lot of non-profits, there are donor requirements, and they themselves want to have that learning mindset. That how are we doing? Are we implementing the way we have planned? But now things have to move just beyond pure monitoring to also an evaluation aspect. The second point that you talked about, that it has to come in the beginning, is again extremely important. More often than not, once the program is over, people suddenly wake up and say, okay, let's just retrospectively try to find. And not having the baseline, not having designed your evaluation in a way that you are capturing it throughout the cycle, you also miss out on how the change is happening. Because we just don't want to know whether the change is happening, yes or no, and the magnitude of change. We also want to know the pathways through which this change has happened so that you can replicate, you can scale up, right? So with that, I would now like to pass on to Anagha, who can share her experience.
Thank you so much, Shagun. In fact, more or less all the points have been covered. So I do come in from both the sides, from the NGO sector as well as the corporate. Corporate since 2013, because that's when the CSR bit became mandatory. So philanthropy actually became strategic CSR from 2013 onwards. Yes, as rightly mentioned, outcome assessment has been ingrained in all of the social programs. So while I was a part of the social sector in the NGO domain, every activity needed to have an outcome assessment and then eventually an impact assessment. Nonetheless, CSR, the rules have made it mandatory that impact assessment is a must now for the corporates for whatever programs we are implementing on ground, and definitely quite challenging internally for all the board members as well as the CSR committee members to accept the fact that now CSR to hai hi tick in the box, now impact assessment is also going to be a tick in the box that we'll need to put across and probably attach it in our BRSR reporting as well. So, and additional cost as well. So nonetheless, impact assessment has been made compulsory. Corporates are finding it a bit tough to accept that another level of expenditure. But we as CSR professionals, and especially people who are from the non-government sector, so professionals who have worked in the non-government sector as well as now moving into the corporate world, are the people who can actually leverage the fact that yes, impact assessment will actually showcase the kind of transformation that you would want to see in the society. All the resources that we are putting in, not just in terms of monetary. In fact, big aspect is even volunteers. Volunteers are also putting in heart and soul in terms of bringing about that change, at the grassroots level. And actually quantifying that and seeing the kind of impact that they are also creating in the long run, co-creating impact along with the CSR funding is something that will possibly get leveraged through this impact assessment study, which has been made mandatory. Nonetheless, couple of things which have been highlighted in terms of need-based assessment. I think now the next step would be that while we have made the impact assessment mandatory, I think we should have need assessment mandatory as well. On what basis are we going to do impact assessment? It's right in the middle of, after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, that, we are talking about mandatory impact assessment. Have we spoken about the fact that it is compulsory that before any corporate starts off with any activity, there has to be a need-based assessment? And then you chalk out a plan. Then you chalk out the activities. On the basis of those is what you can gauge the impact on. So nonetheless, hopefully need assessment also becomes compulsory, maybe Smita, over a period of time. But definitely one big step is to leverage the fact that while impact assessment is compulsory for certain companies, even if you're not in the radar, it's always good to go ahead and do that outcome assessment so that you move into the impact assessment stage very, very smoothly. So I'll just cover that bit, and maybe Shagun, handing over to you.
Thanks a lot, Anagha. And you've added one more assessment to the list of being made mandatory, which is great. I think you're absolutely right. Because I think, and this was actually going to be my next round of questions, is to say maybe we shift a little bit from this aspect of whether we are making an impact to going to the pre-design stage, to asking the questions that are we really looking very intentionally at those whose lives we are trying to change? Are we trying to include their voices in the design of our programs at the very beginning or not? And this is something when Milind and I were talking in the speaker's lounge, he brought up that in his experience, he has many times seen there to be this misalignment between what is being designed in the CSR offices and what the actual needs are of those whose life is going to be impacted. So the question is, can having the framework of impact assessments, and if we start to bring that early on, also start to help us bring this framework at the design site? You know, because once you start thinking about metrics of success at every point, you may also start thinking about needs assessments, scoping studies, and doing your bit to make sure that you are doing the best that you can and getting the right voices. So with that, I wanted to actually turn to the panelists to talk about the challenges that may exist currently, which make it so hard for us to do the things that we want to, right? Because in an ideal world, you know that X, Y, Z are the things that should happen. It all makes sense. CSR has the money. There's so much money that's being poured into development, into social programs, and yet we're not seeing the results we should be seeing. So what are the barriers that we are facing in being able to do this? So Milind, do you want to do this?
Okay. Well, this is something which is very important, but believe me, it's very simple. Now we've been part of both sides. We have a responsibility of spending as a corporate, and we're doing also we are the consultancy partners for a lot of corporates. So we understand, we see it. Now what happens is whatever we the CSR board rather, when they make an annual action plan, so they have their priorities, okay? And when you are implementing it at the ground level, with the community, the beneficiaries, the stakeholders, they have their own priorities, okay? So an intervention which you wish, for example, if I'm just talking loud, at a respective Gram Panchayat, so the corporate would have an agenda, the NGO partner would want, to implement that. But the priorities of the community would be different. So there is a little mismatch there. And so because of which, the desired participation is not, observed. And because of which, maybe on account of 1 to 10, if we want the impact to be better, you fizzle on that number. So what could be done? Only thing is a little awareness that when you're working for a community, you take their concern and, making them aware that this program is for you, and we are just trying to facilitate. And if that mission of a corporate boardroom is aligned with the community, I am sure this problem will get addressed. Otherwise, two people talking at different scales altogether, one in a conference room designing something, with the agenda, etc., and a community which is, thriving for daily earnings. So that has to align. Once that aligns, then things, I guess, will differ. But it's an evolving phase. Whatever we saw from 2014 onwards in first few years of CSR and what we see today, there is a paradigm shift, and things are really improving. So I'm very hopeful, and this we will address in times to come.
Thank you, Milind. I'll take up from your point only, that I'm thinking or feeling like I'm having my participatory rural appraisal class now, what I did in my university, that go to community, have some different diagram and activities and get the need assessment first. I didn't imagine that I had to say the same thing again after 15 years to the people sitting in NGO sector, that how need assessment is very important, and making again mandatory under corporate doesn't mean that we leave the basics of our social program behind. So I'll reiterate the point that let's go back to our cycle of that need assessment first and matching with our objective and all. Challenges are many, yes, under CSR funding was a challenge, now it has been become resources put in there, trained staff for that, and trained staff is not a part of the implementation. And implementation staff doesn't know what to measure and what to do. So there are many challenges at different level, and yes, the basic LFA, logical framework analysis, which we make it at a beginning of the time and then we don't revive it. So name the challenge, I'll make a list of that. Let's not go into that. But the easiest way which I have learned, especially running a government program with the UN funding long back, which I now use for my CSR programs as well, a little secret tip in that, whatever the big program is and whatever the complexity, whether it's a pilot project or a scale up, three things to measure. While planning, you can keep goal, objective, and resources. But during your reviews and assessment, three areas which I and through my programs work with that. One is effectiveness. Effectiveness means matching your objective which you have made earlier based on the baseline. Have you achieved your objective or not? First we check. That's where the challenge of mismatch will not be there. Second is the efficiency. The efficiency is a very simple word, but what budget and resources you have put are efficiently used, are being efficiently used or not. You're overpriced, underutilized. If underutilized, program is not being achieved. Overutilized means program is not well planned and implemented. So efficiency, and third, sustainability. Not that ESG under comma sustainability, yes, but the program sustainability. How long a CSR partner or a funder can fund this project, right? Is this program in your impact, as you have created a good impact next year? What? Is this the part, the phase out, the exit plan is there or not in design? On these three elements, I always, and I'm giving you my secret tip if you're coming tomorrow to me for the proposal, which I look forward, and usually the one thing I do is that I train my grassroots NGOs on these areas, that please go ahead and come back, please do that and come back. So that's one thing, we can meet challenges as well as with the simple steps to ingrain it. And yeah, there's another challenge coming up, maybe in third round I'll say about it. Thank you.
So I think I'm the last one always, most of the points getting covered. But for me, I felt somewhere down the line over a period of time, data has been a bit of a challenge. Tapping data the right way, the right kind of data, which will help in terms of impact assessment. Again, I mean, need assessment definitely is our first step, but then regular monitoring of the project, regular reporting of the project, maybe like even a monthly or a quarterly. Monthly is too much, I know, but quarterly or maybe a 6 monthly evaluation of the program with the right kind of data keeps us on track, and that is something which I personally felt was amiss before the impact assessment became mandatory. In fact, at that point of time, we had to tell the CSR committees as well as the board that we need to have those checks and balances. So we will need to go on ground. We will need to have these regular meetings with the grassroots level organizations. It cannot be that we give out the money at the beginning of the year and expect an annual report at the end of the year. That's not how it will work. And this is where getting data from ground, at least for me personally, because with the kind of organizations, grassroots level organizations that I have been partnering with, very remote locations, they had a challenge in terms of giving me that data. But nonetheless, urban organizations are all now pro. We have some amazing systems. We have dashboards and all that have been created. So it's pretty jazzy now, and getting data is just like a real-time basis. But when we move on to the grassroots level organizations, that has been a bit of a challenge. In fact, just maybe one more point here in terms of impact assessment. I in fact wanted to mention that most of the times when everyone is expecting an impact assessment report at the senior stakeholder level or the board level, everyone wants a lovely rosy picture of whatever we have done. So 99% has to be extremely good, because whatever money that we have pitched in has showcased the kind of impact that we wanted. No one wants to see the gaps. And this is what is very, very important. I think leveraging the fact that now it has become mandatory impact assessment, I think organizations as well as consultancy partners like SGS and other partners as well as corporates, I think we should leverage the fact that we need to figure out what are the gaps and where we can plug in those gaps to actually see the grassroots level impact. That's what the focus is going to be in the long run. So yeah, I mean, not a rosy impact assessment report is what should be expected, but yeah, certain gaps which can be filled in eventually. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Anagha, and thanks, Smita and Milind. I think you guys made such really, really compelling points. And I think while we talked about the challenges, when you framed your challenges, you also kind of gave away the solutions which were embedded within that. But a few takeaways for me which really stood out was one thing that you said, Smita, about the implementation team being different, the MEL team being different, there being lack of expertise in general around the evaluation methods. I think that's a very good point. And I think for that, maybe we also need to start shifting a little bit of our lens from accountability, which I agree is important, to learning. Because the moment you say that there is an inherent incentive for us to not share things that are not working, but the real learning lies in what is not working, right? So even phrases like failing fast, it's not working, let's stop it and let's look elsewhere. Those become very important. But somehow this whole notion of impact assessment has become like a report card where you are going to be evaluated. So whether it's a non-profit who's delivering your program or whether it's the CSR who's going to present it to the board, everyone wants to paint that rosy picture. And maybe that is why also MEL folks are kind of thought of as, some alien beings who are coming into the territory. And from their side also, they are not maybe making extra effort to understand what the program team is saying, because they are the drivers of change on the ground. And just this helicopter model of doing a baseline and then coming at the end line is also not going to work. So I do think there's a lot we can do there also to demystify a little bit of what this MEL is, so that everyone can say, okay, this is not something that we cannot understand or contribute to. The second thing I wanted to just quickly say, and that's going to be my question for the next round, which is around the application or the usability of what we find. So one is to say that how can we incentivize CSR organizations to start use and leveraging this mandatory impact assessments. But second is, once you've done your impact assessments, you've found the findings, how can there be feedback loops to your decision making? And why, is that the case? I would like to know, is that not the case? What are, again, some things that we need to change from a more ecosystem lens of MEL? So that's what I would love. And this time I'll start with you, Anagha.
Thank you so much. In fact, I shall possibly talk about an example of one of the projects that I had been a part of. This is where we were training women to become drivers. And they were coming into the commercial space. So we started off with four-wheeler driving, very exciting, seeing the women from low-income background actually being behind the wheel, starting off with taxis and all. Very, very exciting, very, very rosy, very, very happy. And the board of directors were also very happy. Oh, it's a very different kind of initiative under CSR that we have done. Over a period of time, we trained about 300 women drivers in Mumbai itself, Mumbai and Pune, and some places in Nagpur. And we decided we'll just do a short outcome assessment, not an impact assessment, but an outcome assessment. And kaput, it went real bad. But nonetheless, our board of directors and our CSR committee was very, very happy with the fact that at least out of the 300, 28 women were driving. Not a good number. But this was a very, very non-traditional sector. And I think the best part about this outcome assessment was that we got to know that four-wheeler driving comes with a lot of challenges, not in terms of learning how to drive or driving a vehicle, but actually buying a vehicle at home to run it as a taxi, or getting associated with the aggregators to actually start driving as a taxi driver. So this is where we realized that the timings were also a bit of a challenge. No overnights, nighttime driving. Women had to leave early morning and then come back late at night. What happens to the girls? Safety. What happens to the kids? School, water. Every challenge came into the picture. And this is where we decided, okay, we will need to relook at the way we are, training women to become drivers. Is it only four-wheeler driving? So we added on two-wheeler driving. We added on three-wheeler driving. And this is where we also added on a forklift operators training. So somewhere down the line, it kind of helped women to manage their homes as well as manage the work in which they were being a part of the entire ecosystem. So somewhere down the line, the outcome assessments, the smaller ones that we did periodically, helped us to actually formulate certain other activities within the bigger program, which helped, benefit or rather transform the kind of transformation that we were looking at was easily visible. So, so that way, somewhere at any given point of time, those outcome assessments at shorter period of time, and the challenges that we saw and the kind of models that we came up with was only after that outcome assessment that we did. So yeah, that was a big learning for us as well.
That was such a great example, Anagha, and I'm so glad that you got it, because it just comes, makes everything come to life. Whatever we've been talking about, it's not abstract. And how much the lived experiences of these women then defined how you needed to make tweaks to your program, right? But that also requires a mindset from the beginning, an intentionality that we are there to help them and to make a difference. Not that, okay, I have made this investment and we're going to just stick with it, no matter what, right? Okay, so I'll now turn to Milind.
Well, see, feedback and impact plays an important role. I'm glad what she said, that actually they left the comfort zone and you attempted that. Against 320 could be a small number, but against 20 and the way they are going to look at, and influence others, I'm very sure this 20 will multiply. So this beginning is something which is very important. Open for feedback is something which is not very well welcome, as rightly said, that management would want results and somebody who is implementing is not so very happy saying that, yes, this has, failed. So, but I guess, talking to a lot of corporates and doing the impact studies across, many corporates, there is a very welcoming change that now they are very open to ideas. And they say that whatever is, the fact, share with us. And we are open for that. So that part is also happening, which is very welcoming part. The gap what we see is, we don't want to leave the comfort zone. So we are working with an NGO partner. We are working in one domain. We are working in that area. So we have to revisit someday, understanding, that is it working fine? And does it really require some kind of more addition? So many of the programs we have witnessed that, as she rightly said, the baseline is not there. Need is not there at all. We have just implemented. और 2 साल के बाद क्या करेंगे? Okay, so we cannot go back and say कि वो नहीं किया था. Okay, now there is a fight within the corporate. They say that we have limited budgets. We don't have money for impact. Okay, we don't have money for baseline. So we want to only spend money categorically on spending. So they will not keep money for impact and baseline or need, which is very important part in the entire intervention, because that is going to help you, make your project successful and then scale it. So, a revisit in the vision, understanding that if I have 10 rupees, then let me spend only 8 rupees on the intervention, 1 rupee on impact and 1 on baseline. But things will change. Things are happening in that manner. I am very hopeful about it, and corporates are very open. Only thing is that bridge between the CSR committee and the CSR manager, that has to break. So if he is open that yes, I have tried 10 interventions and 5 have not given the result, kind of result, and if it is backed by the management, so he will be more open and things would change. So feedback mechanism, as she rightly said, and having a very open approach for looking at social, because this is not a regular process ki ye kar diya to ye output aa jayega. No, because there are a lot of stakeholders which are there. So it is, forget the implementing partners, but when you go to the community, there are many people, and then within the implementing partners, the NGOs, they will have problems. Now, I will share an example if time permits. We were doing a survey in Chennai, and where the person who was, so language was a barrier. So we had, only taken them. But for some reasons, they were not there. So, and there was huge pressure on us ki usko karo, because we had a deadline and we had to present this. So these are operational problems. So if you do away and manage things, it will not give you a proper picture, and then things will, on paper it may look that it is right, but it will not give the required result.
Thank you, Milind. Thank you. I think examples are good. I'll take it from your examples only because I can see the clock here. Yes, getting the learnings and feedback, right? That's the question from our assessment. Again, I would say I usually, with my view or my opinion and experience, I usually put more efforts on concurrent monitoring. Yes, we can't wait for 1 year or 2 year or 3 year for assessment. Second, the biggest challenge is keep your implementation team always in coordination and in review feedback with the evaluation team. And CSR manager is also part of the team only. He's not the coming from the corporate and I'm assessing your work tomorrow. No, because everybody's responsibility. That's where we can put the challenge also in that, learn it on concurrent basis rather than that. Other thing is, which is very much, I think, struggling phase for both of the people, we were partners like NGO and corporate. Everything in social sector cannot be quantified, okay? We know we are trying to make it a binary, but we cannot. So in that understanding that some qualitative assessments also are very important. Qualitative need assessment, nowadays, focus group discussions are not that important. And again, when I was a student, focus description has to be done. So qualitative aspect is also very, very important, which I drew from your point that 20 women's stories are the, major data points or stories or studies for qualitative thing. So go beyond statistics, go beyond numbers, one thing. Second, coming back again from mandatory, go beyond mandatory. I always take that intent, developing myself from social to CSR professional, that the rule, the law, the amendment is coming to bring the change in the process. But we are not limited to that law or amendment. The bigger picture is, okay, the glitch here is your impact assessment is mandatory if the project budget is up to 1 crore or beyond. Then what about the project who's taking 50 lakhs? Is not the impact assessment not required? Our learning is not required. Concurrent monitoring is not required. Investment in M&E, need assessment, impact assessment not required. Otherwise, how will you learn for a crore and 10 crore project? So one thing is, go with the intent and the quality of the program first, then understand what is mandatory. That's where our focus when we are talking all in the CSR discussion is on CSR mandate, CSR mandate, CSR mandate. CSR mandate is only 6 or 7 years old. And the social sector has changed from trusteeship to Gandhi and blah, blah. I don't need to go to the history. So that's where I always feel that disconnect. I say that you are NGO partners. You know better than me asking that what do you want to assess. It should come from the field, one thing. Impact is a part of not mandatory for 1 crore part. It is as important as 10 lakh project as well. 10 lakh approval from a CSR committee is not an easy task. You can say, So that also very important qualitative aspect. And one more thing I want to add, maybe time limits so that in our morning session, when impact is going to be important for social stock exchange. So you can see the importance of word impact. So try to understand its value beyond mandate, beyond tick mark, but as a holistic picture for that. Thank you.